In addition to emphasizing one term or one meaning, systematicians also form technical terms from biblical language by creating new meanings for biblical terms. In other words, they use biblical words in ways that they are never used in the Bible. One well-known example of creating new meanings for biblical terms is the technical theological expression, covenant of grace. This phrase is used in traditional Protestant theology to describe God's relationship with His people, not just in the New Testament, but throughout the whole history of the Bible, from the time after the fall into sin until the return of Christ in glory. It's an umbrella concept that includes all divine covenants after the fall into sin. God's covenants with Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, and Christ. Listen to the way the Westminster Confession of Faith describes the covenant of grace in chapter 7, section 3. Man, by his fall, having made himself incapable of life by the covenant of works, the Lord was pleased to make a second, commonly called the covenant of grace, wherein He freely offereth unto sinners life and salvation by Jesus Christ. Notice that the confession does not suggest that the terminology covenant of grace appears in the Bible. Now, it's obvious that the words covenant and grace are biblical words, but they do not appear in Scripture in combination with each other with this technical meaning. As a result, the confession says that this covenantal arrangement is commonly called the covenant of grace. The relationship between God the Father and the Son that unfolds throughout biblical history is commonly called this by theologians, but not by the Bible. Systematic theologians have created this technical terminology using biblical expressions in new ways. To be sure, the concept expressed by the term covenant of grace is a biblical concept. There is a unity to all of God's saving activity in the Bible, and that unity is gracious and covenantal. But Scriptures do not have a term for this large concept. So, systematic theologians coined this technical term to express it. So we see that theologians form technical terminology using biblical language in at least three ways. They emphasize one biblical term for a concept over others. They emphasize one meaning of a term over other meanings in the Bible. And they give new meanings to biblical terms. By these means, systematic theologians seek to ensure the clarity of their discussions of the Christian faith. Now that we have seen how systematic theologians form technical terms using biblical language, we should turn to the second major way the special vocabulary of systematic theology is formed. Systematicians also derive their terminology from sources outside of Scripture. We must always remember that to fulfill the Great Commission, Christian theologians have had to learn how to communicate Christian teachings in the various cultures where God has placed them. This is why patristic theologians often express themselves in Neoplatonic terms, and it's why scholastics often express themselves in Aristotelian terminology. Protestant systematic theologians have also continued to follow the command of Christ by using extra-biblical terms, both by using terminology from earlier periods and by borrowing terms from their contemporary cultures. There are many ways extra-biblical terms appear in systematic theology, but it helps to think of three main approaches. First, systematicians adopt common terminology that is available to them. Second, systematic theologians attribute new meanings to extra-biblical philosophical and religious terms. Third, they often combine extra-biblical terminology with biblical expressions. Consider first how systematic theologians use common ways of saying things that come from outside the Bible. Perhaps the simplest way systematicians draw from extra-biblical terminology as they explain the teachings of Scripture is by adopting common vocabulary of their cultures. Now, in the patristic period, this pool of words and phrases came largely from Greek, the primary language of Christian scholars in the Mediterranean world at that time. In the medieval period, the primary language of Christian scholars had become Latin. In the modern period, Christians have used terminology from the various languages of the cultures in which Christianity has made significant inroads. One of the most important examples of using common extra-biblical terminology is the term Trinity. The word Trinity first appeared around AD 180, when Theophilus of Antioch used the Greek term trios to describe the threeness of the Godhead. This term was later translated into Latin as Trinitas, meaning triad. Now, the term Trinity never appears in the Bible, nor was this term a technical, philosophical, or religious expression. It was simply a word coined from the common word for three. Eventually, this extra-biblical term became the rubric under which theologians expressed the fact that the Scriptures sometimes speak of God as three and other times as one.